Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today, especially after last night's edition of Friday Night's Dynamite on TNT. So let's get straight into today's AEW news stories, beginning with Cody and Brandi Rhodes welcoming the birth of their first child, a baby girl. Now, just days after AEW's Jon Moxley and Renee Paquette became parents, fellow AEW stars Cody and Brandi Rhodes have followed suit. The two-time AEW TNT champion announced on Instagram that he and Brandi's daughter, Liberty Iris Runnels, was born yesterday morning. Cody sent out the following Instagram message. You can see it here, saying 6 pounds, 12 ounces, Liberty Iris Runnels, mother and daughter doing wonderful. So obviously excellent news for the AEW EVP and Chief Brand Officer. Now, Cody and Brandi announced Brandi's pregnancy on the December 16, 2020 episode of AEW Dynamite. They would similarly reveal the gender of the baby on Dynamite in February. Now, in an appearance on the Oral Session podcast with the aforementioned Renee Paquette the same month, Brandi noted it had been a difficult pregnancy for her due to a condition called polycystic ovary syndrome. Now, Brandi has not appeared on AEW programming since judging the walk-off between Peter Avalon and Lee Johnson on AEW Dark. She has been at AEW tapings, however, appearing regularly on Sammy Guevara's vlog during her pregnancy and having a baby shower with the AEW women's roster during Double or Nothing weekend. Now, Cody, meanwhile, is kept busy, of course, in the ring, feuding with QT Marshall's The Factory stable and defeating Anthony Ogogo at Double or Nothing. He is scheduled to face QT Marshall on the July 7 episode of Dynamite in a Miami strap match. That, of course, is the Road Rager special edition of AEW Dynamite on TNT. The bout is the only scheduled match for AEW's first show outside Jacksonville since March of 2020. So, obviously, massive, major congratulations to Cody and Brandi Rhodes. Very exciting news, and just it's all of these births going on at such a short period of time. So very exciting news, and congratulations to both Cody and Brandi. Now, last night on AEW Dynamite, and we will get into some things that happened last night during the Friday Night Dynamite show, but the first teaser videos for AEW Rampage ran during last night's edition of Friday Night Dynamite on TNT. Now, of course, Rampage is set to begin on TNT on Friday, August 13. I can't talk today. Friday, August 13 at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, in the first video, AEW World Champion Kenny Omega is featured with the tagline "Game On." The second had numerous wrestlers, including Cody, AEW TNT Champion Miro, Hikaru Shida, Jungle Boy, Sting, and Jade Cargill. Now, it was previously noted, and we spoke about this before, that AEW President, CEO, Chief of Creative, whatever title you want to give him, he has a million of them, Tony Khan said that Rampage will sometimes be live and other times be taped after Dynamite. Now, AEW's Friday show is going to move along with AEW Dynamite to TBS in January 2022 is when that show is going to move. So it's exciting. I think I will say this about Rampage, and I know we spoke about it before, so I don't want to go into it too much. But obviously it's exciting. Whenever you launch a new show, it's very exciting. It's going to be interesting to see truly how this differs from Dynamite. I know that Tony Khan has said it's an extension of Dynamite and it was going to have equal footing and it's going to have big stars on that show. We know that Mark Henry is going to be a color commentator for it. We don't know a ton of details about it. That's the first time we've ever seen the Rampage logo and the graphics that go with it. I'm sure they'll change as they get closer to the time, but it's really going to be fascinating because, again, there is an excitement. There is absolutely an excitement. Whenever you launch a new show, it's very exciting, and we still are to know a lot of the facts about it. As I mentioned, Tony Khan has said that sometimes it's going to be live, sometimes it's going to be taped. I think some of the excitement has slightly dissipated about Rampage, and the reason I say that is because of what's happened to Dynamite in this time slot on the Friday nights. I think that if Dynamite had done really well in this 10 p.m. time slot to 12 p.m. And obviously Rampage is only going to be a 1 hour show. Dynamite's a 2 hour show. Rampage is only going to be 1 hour. But nevertheless, I think if Dynamite had done really well in this 2 hour time slot on the Friday after SmackDown 10 p.m. to 12 a.m., people would be saying, great, really exciting, great news for AEW. This is going to be exciting. Just another pro wrestling program to watch. Not as if there's enough of them. There's loads of them at the moment, but I think people would be really excited by that. I think some of the excitement and some of the shine has certainly come off of it because we've seen how much Dynamite has struggled in this time slot in terms of the ratings and viewerships. So Rampage in that same time slot, it's going to be fascinating because logic would suggest they're not going to do the numbers that Dynamite does on Wednesday. They're just not. They're just not. It's not on a favorable night. It's not in a favorable time slot. It's been proven at this point that you can't really use SmackDown as the lead-in because the audiences are so separate. Dave Meltzer has reported it. We spoke about it here extensively on the channel that it's only 13% of people that watch 1 minute of SmackDown on Fox on Friday go over to watch Dynamite or go over to watch AEW on a Friday on TNT. Only 13%. And this whole idea about separate audiences, we've kind of known it for a while. We have known it for a while. Look at the Wednesday Night Wars. Those audiences were distinctly different between Dynamite and NXT. NXT had a smaller viewership base most of the time, and they had an older audience. Their key demographic, that key demographic, 18 to 49, NXT was never close to the top of the top cable top 150 or whatever. Dynamite was the opposite. They had a larger viewership base and they had a younger audience. Dynamite was closer to the cable top 150. I mean, they only recently got to the top position for the first time with Blood and Guts, but they were always in and around that position, whether it was 2, 3, 4, 5. Guy Fieri's always taken that spot, and Cody Rhodes jokes about that on Twitter a lot. But it goes to show that the audiences that WWE have and the audiences that AEW have are distinctly different. And again, that goes back to the point of they can't use SmackDown as a lead-in because those fans aren't going over. So it's going to be really interesting when it comes to Rampage how well it's going to fare in that Friday time slot because, again, Dynamite is AEW's prime real estate. It's their flagship show, and it hasn't been faring too well on the Friday nights. It hasn't been faring too well because, again, that date, that day, that time slot is just not favorable. It's just not. Friday nights is not a good position for television anyway. I mentioned this before. WWE, when they initially moved SmackDown to Friday nights back in the mid-2000s, they didn't want to. That was the network they were on at the time, told them, we want you to move it to Fridays because we want our Friday night lineup to be a bit stronger. We want ratings on Friday. And WWE were like, well, we don't want to move to Friday. Because, again, it's a dead night. People are busy. It's the end of the work week. People are going out and about. They're going to the movies. They're going to the restaurants. They've got plans. They're going to nightclubs. They're doing whatever. They're going to bars. They're doing whatever you do on a Friday night, whatever people do. Whatever it is, it's not watching TV. A lot of people, said they're out and about. They're busy. It's not like the middle of the week where you're more likely on a Wednesday night to not be doing anything. So you go, I'll sit down and I'll watch some wrestling from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. on TNT. I'll watch Dynamite. It's not like that on Friday nights. It's the end of the work week. People have their own plans and they'll go off and do something else. So in addition to it not being a good night, the time slot as well isn't favorable as well because it's not a good night. Plus it's 10 p.m. People's plans that they have are fully in swing. If they're out on the town, they're fully out on the town at that point. They're definitely not watching TV. You could argue 8 p.m., well, they might just be sticking around for the first hour before they start to go out and they start to do their other plans, right? 10 p.m., they're in full swing, or they're so out of it that they're back home in bed already. So, again, it's going to be fascinating. And I do think the excitement of Rampage has kind of dissipated slightly because of that, because of Dynamite being preempted because of the NBA playoffs for the entirety of the month of June. We're looking at it now in kind of a different light when it comes to Rampage of going, it's going to be a big ask. It is going to be a big ask for AEW. And still, I think it's the right call by Tony Khan because adding a third hour of Dynamite would have been just nonsensical. I mean, we've seen what that's done for Raw. We saw what that did for Nitro back in the late 90s as well. It's never done. It's never done well. Again, one of WWE's, frankly, one of their biggest achievements is that Monday Night Raw has nearly been 3 hours for 10 years at this point. Can you believe it? 10 years. But look at the audience. Look at the audience. I mean, you could argue that the third hour absolutely does have a part to play in that. So it's going to be fascinating. We're certainly going to see more teasers. And once we have more information about what Rampage is going to look like in terms of matches, in terms of other talent on the show, in terms of whatever, obviously we'll cover it here on the channel. Now, one of the big announcements coming out of last night's edition of Friday Night Dynamite was a huge first-time ever match announced as AEW Dynamite returns to Wednesday night. Now, AEW Dynamite will finally return to its usual Wednesday night time slot on June 30th. The company, I mean, it's not even somewhat, has failed to engage viewers since their programming has been shifted to Friday nights for the month of June due to the NBA playoffs. But now that they're getting towards the end of that, now that they're getting towards going back to Wednesday nights into their usual time slot on their usual nights, Tony Khan obviously wants to capitalize on this in a big way. Now, during the latest edition of Dynamite on TNT, the company announced that Sammy Guevara will lock horns with MJF, which will be the main event for the June 30th show. Now, this will be their first ever singles meeting in AEW after competing against each other only in tag team matches. Now, of course, both Guevara and MJF have been recently mocking each other on Twitter. We covered that extensively here on the channel. But I think a lot of people thought that this would be leading to maybe a pay-per-view match or something like that. A lot of people, I think myself included, would say that MJF versus Sammy Guevara is one of those matches that AEW puts on right now, and you look at it and you say, first of all, it's going to be a great match, but also 2, 3, 4 years' time, that's a main event of a pay-per-view for the AEW World Championship. And I know some people might roll their eyes at that, because as pro wrestling fans, we do get ahead of ourselves and we do proclaim these people, he's going to be a world champion, he's going to be a world champion, they're going to be so great, they're the next big thing, they're going to be the future of this company, blah, blah, blah. But there is this pool of talent that AEW has that is very much going to be the future of the company, and they have a young roster anyway. But you do look at people like MJF, like Sammy Guevara, like Jungle Boy, who of course is facing Kenny Omega next weekend. Those kind of talents they're in their early 20s, like early to mid 20s. You look at those guys and say they're going to be around not even for the next 10 years, for the next 20 years, right? But I mean, nowadays, most pro wrestlers are wrestling into their mid-40s, sometimes even early 50s, sometimes even 60s, if you're Sting, which is madness. But you look at guys like MJF, like Sammy Guevara, like Jungle Boy, the list can go on and on with that AEW roster. It's so young and so talented. You look at those guys and you say, look, if they stick around, if AEW sticks around for the next 20 or 30 years, which it looks like, I mean, early projections, I know, it's difficult to say, but you would think that it will. Barring Tony Khan deciding that he's not going to do pro wrestling anymore, he can afford it. His family certainly can. And again, they make pretty good money when it comes to Warner Media and TV deals and all of that. Like, if AEW is going to be around for the foreseeable future, it looks like it is, you look at guys like MJF, like Sammy Guevara, like Jungle Boy, and you just say, look, these guys, if they stick around with AEW for the next 20 years, then they've got these stars ready-made. And again, logic really would state that MJF, Sammy Guevara, that's a main event of a pay-per-view for the AEW World Championship, not even in the next 10 years, in the next 2-3 years. Realistically, it really is. MJF, to be honest, being the AEW World Champion, I know he had the opportunity against Moxley at All Out last year. It truly is a matter of time. Kenny Omega's the top heel in AEW right now. He's the world champion, so he has to be the top heel. But arguably the second top heel in that company is MJF. I mean, MJF, talk about a guy that's been protective. What has he had? One loss? One pinfall loss? Something like that in AEW, which was to Jon Moxley. I don't even know if that was a pinfall. Did he get choked out? The guy has been super, super, super protected. And we'll touch on this in a second. For his actions last night on Friday Night Dynamite, they are just every single week piling more and more and more and more and more heat onto this guy. Whether it's, costing Cody Rhodes an opportunity at the AEW World Championship, whether it's throwing Chris Jericho off the top of the cage, whether it's whatever, this guy is just constantly getting heat, and eventually he will surpass Kenny Omega as the top heel in the company. Arguably, you could argue that MJF gets more heat now than Kenny Omega anyway. Kenny Omega's a heel, but he's a different kind of heel to MJF. You hate MJF. Kenny Omega, you don't like him, but you kind of respect the ego of Kenny Omega because he is one of the best wrestlers on the planet today. MJF's a different kind of heel. So an argument could be made that MJF already is the top heel in AEW. So it's just a matter of time. It really is a matter of time before MJF wins that World Championship in AEW. And Sammy Guevara, look, he obviously did a lot of work as a heel with Chris Jericho in the Inner Circle. Inner Circle are baby faces right now. I think it's relatively safe to say that Sammy Guevara's money is as a babyface in the future, certainly as an underdog, fight back. I wouldn't say white meat babyface, but certainly an underdog babyface. And this is a match. This is certainly a match that Double or Nothing 2023 or 2024, 2025 could easily be main eventing and be for the AEW World Championship. You could totally see it. So first time ever. Again, slightly surprised that they decided just to put it on an episode of Dynamite. But even though there's no theme to that episode of Dynamite on June 30th, it's almost got its own theme because it's like the return to Wednesday nights. And again, we've got July, which is full of TV specials. So it's a really, really big month coming up for AEW. As I mentioned before, because of being on Friday nights for a month, because the audience disappeared, I mean, frankly, their audience is kind of halved by going to Friday nights. They know that we're starting off with that first Wednesday show, and then obviously once they return to touring, it's a really big month. It's a really big month because I think they realize, look, it's no assumption that the audience is going to come back. We think it will. It probably will. We don't know, though. That first Wednesday night Dynamite could happen, and then suddenly, what if it's 600,000 viewers? People are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That move to Friday was far more damaging than we even realized. So they realized, look, we've got to stack up these shows. We've got to give people a reason to tune in again. We can't rest on our laurels and just assume, they'll tune back in once we go to Wednesdays. We don't know that. We genuinely don't know that. That is an assumption. And we know what happens when you assume things, right? So, fascinating main event for that first Wednesday night edition of Dynamite once again. And it's very exciting. Now, I spoke about last night, we saw MJF attack Dean Malenko. Now, this was after the MMA fight between Wardlow and Jake Hager on Friday Night Dynamite. Now, after the match was done, fight was done, we will talk about the MMA fight in a second, but after the match was done, MJF and Shawn Spears attacked both Hager and Chris Jericho. The Salt of the Earth attempted to break the injured arm once again of Chris Jericho. He locked in the armbar, and Chris Jericho, in his credit, again, talk about getting MJF over, putting heat on him. Chris Jericho was tapping out like a drunk man, as Jim Ross would say. He was really submitting. He was putting that finish over. He really, really was. Now, suddenly, to break up the submission, in came AEW producer Dean Malenko to prevent that from happening. Now, obviously, we saw implied violence between MJF and Dean Malenko right before Double or Nothing. That's when the inner circle were in the ring. They were celebrating their AEW run. Obviously, they formed in the first episode of Dynamite back in 2019. And so they're celebrating their run. MJF comes on the big screen with the Pinnacle, and he says, "Look, Chris," and they do a pan, and you see Dean Malenko. He's up against one of the posts there at TIA Bank Stadium in Jacksonville, which backs on to Daily's place. You see Dean Malenko there, and it's implied he's been beaten up. Now, obviously, people thought at the time, well, they've got to do implied violence because Dean Malenko, legitimately, I think is he 60? He's in his 60s. And in addition to that, Dean Malenko's not just in his 60s. Of course, he's got health issues. The guy's got Parkinson's. He revealed that during the Double or Nothing Starcast event, I think 2019. He did an interview, and when you see Dean Malenko, when you see him doing interviews, you can see his arm. His arm's got the shakes, the tremors that are associated with Parkinson's. So, again, when they did the angle right before Double or Nothing, you assumed, okay, it's implied violence because they're not going to actually beat up a guy in his 60s that's got Parkinson's. I mean, that's a step too far, right? Right? Wrong, because last night on Dynamite, MJF punched Dean Malenko and he took a bump. I mean, he took a bump. It's the craziest thing I think I've ever seen. I mean, it really is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like I said earlier this week, because Ted DiBiase took a bump on NXT this week, and again, Ted DiBiase hasn't done anything really physical since mid-90s. I mean, like early 90s. He retired again. I want to say like 93, 94, 95. I mean, he was retired by the mid-90s, and he's spoken about having knee replacements, and he's got bad knees, and Ted DiBiase took a hell of a bump this week. He didn't take a bump, like I said, where it's a kick to the gut, fall to the knees, go over. He took a bump of a right hand, flat back, arms out. He took a hell of a bump. And to his credit, Dean Malenko last night, so did he. Again, this is a guy, again, in his 60s, with Parkinson. I mean, Parkinson, there's no cure for that, unfortunately. And he took a bump. I was staggered. I was absolutely staggered by it. I mean, I was absolutely staggered by it. And I don't know how I feel about it. If I'm going to be brutally honest here, I really don't know how I feel about it. Part of me looks at it and says, good for Dean Malenko, right? Because the thing is with that illness, it's all about, and again, because there is no cure for it, it's a degenerative condition. And over time, you do get worse, and unfortunately, there is no cure of it, and it's a horrible disease. But we are learning more and more about it over time. There's some great charities, and there's some famous people over here in the UK. That I think one is a famous sports presenter. Dave Clark has Parkinson's, and some of the stuff he's been able to do despite his condition is incredible. I mean, this guy's climbed mountains, and I think done marathons. It's incredible, and they're showing more and more that despite the illness, you can do more. I still don't know if that really equates to taking a bump. Again, I really didn't know how I felt about it. The only thing I will say is that surely one would think, given the AEW medical staff there, surely they would have run that by the medical staff and say, look, do you think I can? I just don't know. I really don't know how I felt about it. I thought he took a great bump for what that's worth. right? I mean, he took a good bump. He's not having a match anytime soon. Rest assured that. Again, I just don't know. I would think realistically you could make more of that as well. Again, I'm not massively for it, to be honest, because again, it just makes me feel slightly uncomfortable. And I guess that's the point. It's pro wrestling. You're meant to evoke an emotion. I totally get that. I still don't know how I feel about it. I really don't know how I feel about it. But what I will say is, look, if you are going to go with it, if that's the angle you're going to go with, I would respond to that by saying that should close the show. Right, that should close the show. That should be an angle where MJF clocks Dean Malenko with a right hand. It's the closing moment of the show. The announcers are shocked. We have all of these people get into the cage. Dean Malenko is then stretched out. Yeah, people go quiet. You play it up like it's a real legitimate thing. You don't move on to a Kazarian promo backstage afterwards because it feels like nothing. It's too rushed. That is a great example of a segment. Again, I don't know how I feel about it, but it's a great example of a segment where you should go, everyone should just stop. Take your time with that one. If there's ever a time to take your time, it's when MJF has just clocked a guy with Parkinson's and you're getting all these people into the cage and people are worried and people are shocked on commentary and, you know, take it away from being pro wrestling at that point. Make it feel real. That is the perfect time to take your time. Go to commercial, come back. You're still getting Dean Malenko out of the cage. You're concerned. You know, I think back to Raw is War 97 when the New Age Outlaws at 98, when the New Age Outlaws shoved Chainsaw Charlie and Cactus Jack off the stage in the dumpster. They go to commercial, they come back, there's still people looking around the stage, they're still selling concern. Vince McMahon's out there, people are going up to Vince McMahon saying, how could you do this, Vince McMahon's talking to the New Age Outlaws going, what did you do, you took it too far. They could have done something like that. That's how I would have booked this one. I would have, had MJF, again, I don't know how I feel about it, but I would have had MJF clock Dean Malenko, everyone's shocked, MJF's going, even MJF's like, I can't believe what I just did, kind of situation. People are going quiet. Everyone's rushing into the cage. Maybe have Tony Schiavone rush out from the announcer booth as well. Get into the cage as well. He's got history with Dean Malenko. Obviously, Jericho's in there. Maybe have some people from the back come out. Maybe even have Tony Khan come out, get in the cage. MJF standing there like he is on the screen right now. And he's like, oh, I can't believe it. Again, they're going to commercial. And people are getting angry with Tony Khan. People are getting angry with MJF. The Pinnacle looked a bit freaked out by it because, again, he just clocked a guy who's got a serious health condition. They could have really made this something more. It could have meant so much more than just a little bit of heat and then we go to a Kazarian promo. It could have meant so much more. And I think that would have been the best way to book it. I really do. Now, speaking last night on Dynamite, Andrade had an interview with Jim Ross, and he teased a possible surprise for the future. Now, Andrade, our IDOLO, sat down for an interview with legendary broadcaster Jim Ross this week on AEW Dynamite to discuss his future aspirations in the promotion. Now, introduced by his managerial figure, Vicky Guerrero, the former WWE superstar, made his debut a couple of weeks ago on Dynamite. Now, fans were anticipating his immediate arrival in AEW ever since his release from WWE in March of this year. Now, Andrade claimed that although the AEW roster has many stars, he stands as the sole superstar. When asked if he wanted to capture the TNT or AEW Championship, the former United States champion replied in affirmative, saying he wants a shot at both titles. Now, Andrade, our Idolo, spoke about the Guerrero family, praising the late great Eddie Guerrero and why he decided to associate with them. In closing, the AEW star teased the surprise that he and Vicky Guerrero have in store for the fans. Now, as far as what that surprise is, I have no idea. I do look at Andrade, our Idolo in AEW right now, and I do struggle to see who is he going to feud with. I don't know. It doesn't seem particularly obvious at the moment. That's not a bad thing at all, but it doesn't seem particularly obvious as to who is this guy going to face off with. I don't know. It's very interesting. I don't think he's going after any championships anytime soon. They're both held by heels. Andrade seemingly is a heel. And again, you have to work up the rankings. That's how AEW works, right? So, I don't know. It's certainly fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see how this one goes forward. Going back to that MMA fight, of course, Jake Hager defeated Wardlow in the MMA cage fight last night on Dynamite. What I will praise AEW for is I thought the aesthetic was good. I liked the cage, obviously the octagon kind of structure. I liked the AEW branding on the mat that they had as well. I'll just be honest. Worked MMA fights just don't do it for me. They just don't. It did feel like a bit of a miss, to be honest. And the reason I say that is, again, because we've seen this tried before throughout pro wrestling history, whether it's WWE, whether it's wherever. Worked MMA fights, they just don't really work. The best kind of way to do it in terms of worked MMA fights is when you stick it to being a pro wrestling match, but you make it just, you add in, the elements of MMA realism. The great example for me is Kurt Angle Samoa Joe Lockdown 2009. When was it 2008, 2009 round, whatever it was, when it was Impact's most successful pay-per-view, when Samoa Joe defeated Kurt Angle. That was kind of a play on an MMA kind of build-up. Kurt Angle even appeared in MMA-style shorts in that one. It was in the cage, so it felt a bit like the Octagon. But it was still a pro wrestling match at the end of the day, because that's what you're watching. You're watching a pro wrestling program. I think a lot of people don't tune into pro wrestling to watch a worked MMA fight. And they kind of did a similar thing with Jon Moxley and Jake Hager last year. It was I think it was Jon Moxley's first title defense was against Jake Hager, and they kind of played that up as, oh, it's kind of MMA kind of thing. And it didn't work. It didn't work. And I didn't feel that it worked last night. Again, you tune in for pro wrestling. I thought the aesthetic was very good, and I thought the production was really, really good. I just didn't think it worked. I just didn't think it worked, and I didn't really care for it. Finally, last night on AEW Dynamite, we saw the debut of Arn Anderson's son, Brock Anderson, making his in-ring debut on Dynamite. Brock Anderson teamed up with Cody Rhodes in a winning effort against QT Marshall and Aaron Solo on Dynamite last night, making his in-ring debut of AEW. Brock is the son, of course, of Arn Anderson, who was also ringside for the match. Brock got a jackknife pin on Solo for the pinfall victory. Afterwards, Arn Anderson gave his son a big hug for the performance. I thought Brock looked fine. I think he looked, again, I think he was fine. I think he was in there with Cody and QT Marshall, obviously two guys he's obviously been training with, and Aaron Solo, again, who is actually at the Nightmare Factory in Atlanta. So everyone he was in the ring with last night, he trained with. So again, that makes it a lot more comfortable. He's a spitting image of his father. I mean, he is literally Arn Anderson. It looks like Arn Anderson in one of those face apps that you can, de-age in 20 years. I mean, it really does look like that. I thought he looked fine. The Factory, I mean, what is the point of them? Really, what is the point of them? They just lose. They lose every match. I don't know. They'll say like, well, they won a couple of weeks ago. QT got a pinfall after Anthony Ogogo got the punch on Cody Rhodes, but their record's not good. And to be honest, the record's not good, and I could care less. I really could care less. We started talking about this video, talking about Cody Rhodes, and obviously congratulations, but I could not care less. I could not care any more about the whole, the drama, the Cody Rhodes soap opera that is AEW Dynamite when it comes to friends turning on him, the Nightmare Family, the Nightmare Factory, Second Generations, Cody's friends, the trainers, the students, all this kind of stuff, this weird Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi stuff. I just could not, you can't convince me to care. You really can't. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of the AEW news stories spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about AEW, WWE, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, gut the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.